Day 4, I literally came in here on 2 wheels because I've been watching it. It is riveting. This might be the trial of the century. And I just want to, as a lawyer, I want your view on it. But I think that the prosecution is laying out an airtight, and maybe I'm biased because I'm a human being. Maybe if I'm not a human being, I'm looking at this differently. But as a human being, there is no defense for Derek Chauvin putting his knee on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, especially 4 minutes after he was already unconscious, especially after they just brought on the paramedics who said, I thought he was dead when we came up. And the man wouldn't get off of him. And I had to take the handcuffs off after he was already in the ambulance because he wouldn't move, didn't want us to come in. I tried to take his pulse. And then the girlfriend this morning. Oh my goodness, heartbreaking. So they're doing equal parts emotion, equal parts eyewitness, equal parts bringing humanity. And I thought today, with the prosecution bringing the girlfriend on to talk about George Floyd's and her drug use, was also masterful because it literally snatched from the defense the whole thing that they were just going to demonize George Floyd over his drug use. Thank God we are in a period where people who are addicted to drugs are no longer pariahs. They're considered people with health issues, people with sicknesses. 10 years ago, George Floyd would have been a whole demon. 8 years ago.
Yeah, and I think those that the drug use with the opioid addiction was from pain relief. They were prescribed
from his neck.
initially.
He had a neck injury.
And so that's
a neck injury, ironically.
Yeah, and I think another point I think that's really important. What you made there was what happened after he went unconscious, because the whole point of using these holds or these pins or any of these aggressive maneuvers by the police is to subdue the suspect. And so if the suspect's unconscious, they're not a threat. And not only was the knee on the neck, I forgot about this until I heard about it yesterday, but they had knees on his back or his hip and pulling his legs down, and he had handcuffs behind him. So they had 3, I believe, different points of pressure plus the knee on the neck, which is to me just absurd. And there's a lot of talk. I also heard that, his anxiety and stuff about being put in a police car and being claustrophobic and him freaking out. And again, seeing him, when someone's about to die and they their bowels kind of let go. These are all things that a reasonable officer under the circumstances, which is a legal phrase, should know. And it should be their duty to know that these are the ways to do it. There was never a point when the police officer checked his pulse until much long after that. So these are, to your point, I think they're really building a very strong case. And remember, they don't have to prove intent for these manslaughter charges. It's just recklessness, right? You just have to show that, that they acted inappropriately.
I watch enough 911 and all of these TV shows where there's an urgency to preserve life. No CPR, no compressions, no attempt to try to revive him. As you mentioned, we're not even going to check his pulse. But you're sworn to care for people. And again, this somebody said on my YouTube channel, because we've been posting videos about, the conversations we're having around this trial. And they said, well, Derek Chauvin's innocent until proven guilty. And I said, wouldn't it have been nice if George Floyd was afforded that same courtesy?
Yeah.
For a $20 counterfeit bill, allegedly, that we're not even sure if it was his bill, if he committed at worst misdemeanor, very low grade felony at worst, maybe, not dangerous, not armed, not somebody that was inflicting bodily harm. The crime, allegedly, because he never got a chance to go to court, due process was not afforded George Floyd. But we want innocent until proven guilty for Derek Chauvin. How does that work, Sina Ghaznavi?
I don't know. I mean, I think what the defense will probably do is make the argument or make the framing of the case to be a mob mentality of everyone and the news media and everyone piling on and blaming Derek Chauvin for every crime that's ever happened in police brutality cases. And I think that's how they're going to try to like shake the jury up and to shake their resolve. Because remember, the defense doesn't have to prove anything. They just have to disprove or poke holes in the prosecution's case. But I think a good defense should have a theory of the case, right? They should provide some context or some logical through line. This is what happened on my case when I was doing the pizza murder trial, when I was a juror for that. Not only was the defense attorney unable to poke enough holes in it, but none of us could even wrap our brains around a logical kind of path to where the defendant was not guilty. And I think the same thing is going to happen here. How can you tell me that you needed to have your knee on his neck after he was unconscious? Where in the manual, where in any sort of standard of practice, whether you're a police officer, which is a higher level of duty, or even a child, right? You could go all the way down to the bottom. They're going to know that if the guy's unconscious, that's a wrap. What are you doing? And that, I know, again, you don't have to, the defense doesn't have to prove that, but the jury is going to be asking themselves that in the juror's room when they're talking about it. And I think that's where it's going to happen. And
I would love to hear, because you're both an attorney and the only person in this room that has served on a jury. I've been called several times. They never picked me. Sina. They never picked me.
Can't imagine why.
I tried the last time. I was like being docile and everything. I don't know. I don't have any bumper stickers. I'm just.
I just had a little show. I kind of whisper on the air 3 hours a day.
I just want to go and not
have any strong opinions about anything, really.
Nothing. I'm just here. Didn't work. Something in my eyes must have betrayed me. But as watching it as a juror, somebody who has been on a murder case, is there, in your opinion, a way? And now I want you to put on your lawyer's hat. That this, again, but I don't know if because we're humans, if we're able to even walk down this path, because I can't see any defense for what happened to George Floyd for this killing. I can't see a defense. And I thought it was, again, masterful that the prosecution brought up his drug use. They're like, no, we're going to handle this. You can cross-examine, but we're going to bring this to the table. You're not going to try to act like, you're bringing this to the table. What defense could they possibly have that a juror would have some reasonable doubt that George Floyd would be alive if not for this?
The only thing, and I haven't watched 100% of the trial, frankly, because it's a little triggering for obvious reasons. It's a little tough to watch. But from what I've been reading and watching and stuff, the only point that I could see where maybe let's say a hardline juror, a hardline pro-cop juror would say is the moment when George Floyd resisted going in the car is when everything changed.
Okay.
And that, but again, we still go back to after he's fucking unconscious. Why do you have your knee on his neck? Like, why do you have this many points of pressure? So again, that's going to have to be the argument that happens. And there will be an argument in that jury room when they're deliberating.
And they only need one juror to hang the, they only need one. They only need one to hang it.
But I think I don't think there's going to be a hung jury in this case. I think there's going to be enough evidence. I think they're going to have a unanimous verdict one way or the other.
What way, if you're predicting?
I think
we're
guilty,
only at day 4.
I think here's the thing that's going to get the devil's in the details, right? Which charges is he going to be guilty for? Right. And so I'm not as familiar with like the state statutes and stuff like that, and the elements of each of those. But they could, say he's not guilty of the higher version of the crime, guilty of the lower version of the crime. He gets a lower sentence. And frankly, if he gets the lower sentence, is that going to be enough to basically appease the kind of, the need for justice? Is that going to be enough justice? And I think
this about appeasement? I've heard it said, Derek Chauvin's not on trial. America's on trial. The criminal justice system is on trial. The police are on trial. All police. I think they're going to serve him up as a sacrificial lamb to say he is an outlier. He is an anomaly. He didn't follow protocol or training. Bringing on the police chief, who will be, I think, coming on tomorrow or the day after. Tomorrow is Friday, maybe next Monday. The police chief of Minneapolis will be basically for the prosecution telling us that Derek Chauvin did not follow protocol. So now he's an anomaly. Throw the book at him, send him away to jail, throw him under the jail, and then we can go on to do business as usual.
I mean, this is the bad apple analogy.
Right.
There's just a few bad apples, but you're saying like, someone would say that the bad apples are an anomaly. I would say the tree is the anomaly.
Yes,
the whole
tree, the roots of that tree.
You just happen to have some good apples on the tree that is rooted in this quote anomaly of not going by the protocol.
And what happens to the three? Because the Nazis, those that said they were just following orders during the Nuremberg trial, they were not able to. I mean, to the point where they just, who was it? John Demjanjuk, who was a guard living in America for like 50 years. They grabbed his ass up. They were like, we don't give a damn. It's 50 years you're going down. There was recently, like last year, another Nazi guard was found in America. They're not playing with that. I was just following orders. I will not be satisfied. You talk about appeasement. This is not about appeasement. It is about justice. Every single one of those officers must be held accountable, must be convicted in order for the system to at least have a little bit of shaking at its roots, to say, if I'm in a situation like this, it is my responsibility to not allow for a fellow officer to do what Derek Chauvin did. I have to intervene, or else I too, just like accomplices that are on ride-alongs. I was just in a car. I didn't commit the crime. No, the criminal justice system says if you're in that car during a drive-by, you're equally as culpable as the person that shot. Why isn't it the same here? Or should it be? I think it should be.
I think it should be, but we have a higher standard of protection for police officers in this country. And I think that goes to the fundamental problem of why the system is so old. I think I brought this example up before. In my old neighborhood in Brooklyn, I was walking down the street past the police station, and it said since 1863 to 2020 or whatever it was. And I was like, isn't that the fundamental problem here? Is that this same institution is the same as it ever was since before the Civil War. This is what we need to address. And forget, defund the police. I would like a refund from the police, and I think we are owed a refund.
Yes. And if we could resurrect some lives that because I mean, as I'm watching this trial too, the fallout from the trauma. You say you're triggered. I don't know if you've ever had a police encounter that shook you to your core. I have. I don't know too many Black people who haven't. So when today they show the cam video of the police coming, George Floyd is in his car, gun drawn in this man's face, and he had been shot already previously. So that trauma, but everyone who's watching it, the little girls that were taking the video, they're crying. Could I have done more? The 18-year-old that was the store clerk, maybe I shouldn't have called, but I was going to get charged that $20, so I had to do something. The firefighter who's crying because she just wanted to check his pulse to make sure he was alive, because that's how she was trained to consider human life. All of those people are having nightmares. And then the millions of other people all over the globe for whom every time they see that video, they see themselves, they see their brother, they see their uncle, they see their father. They see it could happen to me. And it plays over and over. That trauma, we need a collective mental health intervention around this, because this has happened so frequently. I think about New York, stopping and frisking. How many people have been stopped and frisked in New York? More Black men stopped and frisked in New York than existed, which means multiple people were stopped and frisked multiple times for nothing, just being Black and happy. That's traumatic. I think of all the Khalif Browders that didn't kill themselves. And I'm saying this is a culmination of that. Watching this trial is more than just watching, a case of a man with a knee on his neck. It is all of us, even the cop coming with his gun drawn for a nonviolent counterfeit bill case, because a man's sitting in his car. Why do you need to put the gun in the face of a white man if he's sitting in his car? Do you do that? And if the answer is no, why did you do it to him? Why did you do it to fill in the blank? All the people who've had guns drawn on them by police, or cops come to your car with their hand on their weapon. for a traffic stop. That's happened to me. And you're like, why is his hand on his weapon? All right, I was speeding, maybe 10 miles over the speed limit. Does it warrant you putting your hand on your weapon, and then there's somebody else at the passenger side, hand on his weapon? What the hell? Okay, 10 and 2, my hands here. Is my paperwork okay? And then you start sweating, and you're going through your head, is this the day that I die? And if you've never had that internal conversation, don't call with some nonsense, and don't talk to me about due process, and don't talk to me about innocent until proven guilty, because from the very initial encounter, this system failed George Floyd. 866-801-8255. And okay, I was promising myself, listen, and maybe I shouldn't watch it, because every day I'm getting more and more furious at the helplessness that even if he's convicted, Cena, even if they say guilty, I'm not satisfied, because I know tomorrow somebody's going to have an encounter like George Floyd. Maybe they'll survive it. But the memory of that, the trauma, you talk about his anxiety, being 6'3", stuffed into the bed. Have you ever been in the back of a police car?
Yeah.
Okay, me too. And the last time I was in the back of the police car, I ran out of gas on like a highway, and they were taking me to get some gas, but they couldn't let me sit in the front. So I had to sit in the back, my big ass in the back. And I was claustrophobic, and I'm not 6'3". I'm 5'10", and I was it is purposely tight. Like your knees are right up against the thing. It pulls in. I mean, it's ridiculous the way they have that, because you got to know that they have people that are not small in the backseat. You're not picking up children. So they make it so uncomfortable, but you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. So they drove me to the mile down to get some gas, and I came back, put gas in my car. And I felt some ways about it, though. See, now I was not a criminal in this particular instance, or had done anything. I was just going to get gas, but they could not let me sit in the front seat. And I was like, oh my God, I wasn't handcuffed with my hands behind my back. You know, I think about the rough ride Freddie Gray got, because I've seen I've seen a lot where they slam on the brakes till you hit your head in the back. Like I've watched that with Banshee and a few other things. I just watched.
And that's in the wagon too, where it's
Yes.
just metal everywhere.
Oh my
and
gosh.
Sharp edges everywhere. There's no seat really per se in the classic form of it. It's like a metal bench in there. That it's, you know, pure violence and power. And I think, you know, one thing I'll say about Minneapolis, they are trying, the city council is moving forward with an amendment to create a public safety force and to slowly basically refund the city from the police force, so that nonviolent crimes will be addressed by this new public safety force that they're trying to establish there. And I think that's what we need to think about again. And I think this goes to your very point. No matter what happens in this trial, justice will not be served because there's so many injustices that happen. The only way to start thinking about that is to let's get to the root cause, which is we've put people in positions of power that should not have been. For what reason? We thought it was to keep us safe, but we're not safe. And so we need to rethink that.
This was never about safety. Never.
Well, yeah.
Never. It was never about safety. It was always about control, dominance, and protection of white wealth. 866-801-8255. And white property. White property and white wealth. That's what this has always been about, which is why in that in the last season of Shameless, Carl, and I'm bringing in these popular film because there's something to be learned. Carl is a cop, and in his neighborhood is being gentrified, and one of these wealthy people, they called the police on because they're evicting folk during a pandemic, and Carl tries to arrest the wealthy guy that called the police because he's double parked. And the captain comes, we don't arrest people who drive Mercedes. We don't arrest rich people. Don't you know? We don't buy, we work for them. They're the reason why we have that nice lunchroom. They're the reason why.
I don't know if you heard about this too, but Menlo Park, where Facebook is located, Facebook is funding the local police force there. They have their own police force, and they are going beyond their city limits to protect and serve, but they're really just going and harassing locals and people that have been living there for generations. And what do you know? They're all people of color. Oh, so no surprise there. I don't see any developers wearing sweatpants and Allbirds getting pulled over, but it's a lot of people that are now seeing what a private security force that is funded basically, that is actually the police there. And this is all, unless we jump on this systemically, right? And I'm talking at a federal level, okay? Then it's going to be in trouble. The federal government needs to create a minimum, right? A minimum amount of safety that we need to be giving people. And then everyone else can build on top of that. You know, if you want to have your state's rights, or if you're a community, you want to have an RPG missile, fund it yourself. But you know what? We got to have a police force that is not violent constantly, that knows how to de-escalate, that is actually trained in human biology and knows these things. These are basic things. Police should be smarter.
Oh, no, this was not intelligence, Tina Ghaznavi.
Am I by being naive? Yeah, he knew what he was doing.
No, you're not being naive, but I think you're being a human being, because you wouldn't do it. You couldn't imagine somebody willfully taking the life of another human being, because you wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do it. 866-801-8255. I watched a man willfully kill somebody. I watched that video twice now. He knew what he was doing. He was trained. 866-801-8255. All right. Y'all want to talk about this today? Y'all didn't want to talk about it yesterday. Day 4. Y'all here. All right. We're going to go to the phone. Cena's here. And don't call up with any bull crap today, because I am not here for it.
Yeah, neither am I.
Richard in Texas, where you can go to a baseball game apparently with no mask on. Hi, Richard.
Right. Hello, Miss Hunter. Listen, maybe I'm missing something, but I'm just trying to figure out, why did the store clerk let Mr. Floyd walk out of the store with items if he knew that the bill was counterfeit? And where is this bill? This is evidence. Where is that $20 bill?
So number one, he was 18 years old. 18 years old, afraid for his job, afraid that the $20 apparently he could not afford for that $20 to be taken out of his pay. I don't know if you've ever, I worked at Roy Rogers when I was in high school, and the paycheck at the end with all his taxes taken out, I was like, this is not worth it. I'm walking 3 miles to Roy Rogers, frying up some chicken, walking home for $113. I don't think so. So I don't think 18-year-olds like have the agency to, process, and he's working as a store clerk. It's not in college. I'm not disparaging him. I'm saying at 18, I wasn't thinking ABC. Somebody getting to you like, I know this is wrong, and he's processing. He's like, oh, I'm going to get docked for this. Let me do something. We're not going to put the blame on his 18-year-old. We're not going to do that, Richard.
Okay.
Let's go to the, you're welcome. Sorry, we're not going, what? Because then.
Also, they always tell you when you work at a job, don't chase after someone like that. Don't, if someone's, don't be a hero. It's not worth it.
But there was no altercation. George Floyd, he said, was affable, came in, he was jovial. He was, he said he seemed like he was high. But even somebody made a point, fentanyl, opioids are downers. So we're not talking about, PCP, where he was wild and crazy. No, if fentanyl and weed and some other opioid was in his system, chilling. So this wasn't even an altercation. And he was sitting in his car. So it wasn't like, oh, I got away with this $20. Ooh, he was sitting in his car like he wasn't trying to run. Y'all, okay. Let me head over to Dwayne in DC. Hi.
How are y'all today?
I'm processing, Dwayne. I don't know. My soul hurts. My soul hurts for the lack of humanity that we seem to have in this country, and that half of America sees, and this is a poll. It went from 60-something% of people thought it was murder down to 36% of Americans looked at that video and said that Derek Chauvin did not murder George Floyd. I don't know what kind of country this is or what kind of world this is, where there are people who could watch that and walk away with any conclusion other than that man, that knee, and the other 3 that prevented any kind of help for George Floyd are culpable for his death. So I'm feeling some ways.
Truly agree. Well, I watched the prosecution. Like you said, they did a great job of laying out the drug use. So the the defender couldn't come back and say, oh, well, he did this. They already laid it all out. He was on drugs. He was this, he was that. So they can't even bring that up. And even if they do, the jury already heard it. Here's what the problem is, though. Since we can't see who's on the jury, there's going to be, or hopefully, or unfortunately, there may or may not be a racist sympathizer or a cop sympathizer. So they could see all the evidence, know he's wrong, and still side with him and still fuck up the jury when they come to make the decision.
Well, that happened in the Walter Scott case. There was one angry white man on the Walter Scott juror that said, "There's no way I'm going to convict a police officer," and it ended in a hung jury that ended up in a mistrial, and then they retrialed, and then they convicted. You were on a jury. Racial makeup, I think is 6 and 6. 2 alternates, 2 white women, but there's several of the women that are of color. They're multiracial. George Floyd's girlfriend, I think a lot of people think she's white. I don't know if she's white. Actually, I don't think that she is white, which tells you that race is a made-up construct because y'all don't even know what she is. She's a human being.
On my juror, I was a juror in Brooklyn. It was like a Benetton ad. We had like the United Nations at the table. It was every age group, it was wild.
Was there pushback? Was there somebody that was a sympathizer for the other side as you guys were arguing it, or was it like a slam dunk?
There was a few people that wanted convincing of what the theory of the case was, of what could have possibly happened. And we just looked over the evidence. There was a ton of video cameras in our case that were showing different things. Nothing completely 100% conclusive, but it was one of those things where, let's say you're in the subway and you see people getting on the train with wet boots and wet umbrellas. You can conclude that it's raining outside. If you see that for a few stops, right? You could conclude that. So that's kind of what we had to do in our case.
Okay. 866-801-8255. Michael Slager, 2016, is shooting. I just want to get my facts all out there. 5-week trial ended in a mistrial because of the hung jury, because of that one juror. He was indicted on federal charges, including violation of Scott's civil rights and obstruction of justice. He shot Walter Scott in the back. And in the 2017 plea agreement, he pleaded guilty to federal charges of civil rights violation. So there's levels to this. There's levels to this case as well. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, December 17th, for second-degree murder. So we'll see. There's levels, though. Even if one juror wants to F it up, I think there's a federal case to be made. And with this current administration, I think in this current attorney general, is not going to be the same as with Barr sitting in that office. Your thoughts on that, Sina?
A federal case, I don't know. I actually don't have any thoughts on that if I want to think about it, because I would like to see it handled at the local level, right? And I'm watching Keith Ellison be very, very, very silent and quiet, but I see his fingerprints. I spend a lot of time with him. He is a smart man. And the methodical way, even who they're using, the opening prosecutor who laid the case, very Johnny Cochran-like, then they came back with the white guy. Now today was the woman. I was like, oh, they do the white woman. This prosecution to me is doing a very methodical, very, very, very smart layout. And it's a drumbeat. It is a performance. That impacts people in the jury box, right? You have to, by the way, remember, we're watching this trial, but they're not as engaged as we may think they are. It's boring when you're sitting there. And so we really have to remember that it is a slow slog, and the prosecution and as well as the defense are going to do whatever they can to make it, and I hate to use the word entertaining, but engaging is probably a better word, to keep their attention, especially when they get into the details of some of the different elements of the crimes and how things should go and how they shouldn't go. They've got to do these things. So varying up the people, making sure that you've got a good opener, making sure that you've got the right people, changing it up, really freshens the jurors' consciousness. I stuck in some Swedish fish at my trial because I needed some sugar and I was eating. And every time I would put my hand in my pocket, all the other jurors would look down the road because I was at the end, and they'd hear me looking for my Swedish fish. So
Well, I think that's why it was also brilliant to bring in George Floyd's girlfriend today and then
Yeah.
introduce the drug use. And I thought that was brilliant because even the visual of her, I was like, oh, Courtney Ross, 45 years old. They used her to do two things: undermine the defense's case that George Floyd was this raging homicidal maniac, hopped up on drugs. She humanized him. She talked about him being a mama's boy. She talked about how he treats his children, how much he loves his children, how he liked to play football. She made him a person today. And then she broke down, what did he call you? He called me mama. Was he calling out for her? Was he calling out for his mother? But it still made it like at the last moment of his life, he was calling out for somebody, either his mother in heaven or mama, his girlfriend, because he knew he was going to leave this earth. It was masterful bringing her. All right, let's take one more call and we're going to go to break. 866-801-8255. Let's go to Deborah in Massachusetts. And when we come back, we'll take more calls. Hi, Deborah.
Hi, Karen and your crew. I thank you, Karen, for your show. I really appreciate it, and you educate me. One of the things I want to talk about is in reference to the videos they keep playing back. And I'm just so worried because I remember when Rodney King was beaten unmerciful, and I thought that was a slam dunk case. They kept showing the videos over and over again till they didn't just humanize them, they began to dehumanize them. And white people started making more excuses, like you said, as before, can't you see that there was something wrong here? And over 60-something% of people last year thought that that the cop was guilty, and then now they're seeing it a different light. That's just something I want to talk about because that's my fear.
Well,
I've lived on this planet long enough to see a lot of miscarriage of justice when it comes to us. And I just hope that constantly showing that video doesn't have an adverse effect on the jury and on the case.
I think
Karen,
it's actually,
thank you again.
You're welcome. I think it's having the opposite effect. We hadn't seen that video really since May. And the way they showed it, the way they set it up, the way they told us what to look for, the things that we're seeing now we didn't see before, the different vantage points, the body cam video, it is all giving credence to the case that the prosecutor is laying out. This video is important, which is why I forced myself to watch it again, seeing the urine stream, seeing the 4 minutes. And they told me that. So I zoned in on at the 4-minute mark, he's unconscious. And this man keeps his knee on for an additional 4 minutes and 20-something seconds. I watched for that because the prosecutor told me to watch for it. So this video is important. The different angles. I didn't know the cops came up on him with the gun. So it's fresh for us. It's not like Rodney King during a non-social media era where it was playing on television all the time that tainted the jury, and they moved the venue. So they moved the venue to an all-white area so that the cops could have a jury of their peers who already saw Rodney King as King Kong and Godzilla all in one. So that was all. This is not that. This trial is happening here. The jury is diverse. It's in Minneapolis. And the videos, all of the angles are showing the case for why this cretin, Derek Chauvin, should be in jail. That's my opinion.
And I think just going back to the Rodney King case, I'm glad you brought that up because that's actually one of the cases that got me very interested in how media is used in trial cases when I was in school. One of the most, pernicious things that was done by the defense attorney and took advantage of the lack of knowledge by the prosecution in that case was the defense attorney showed the video. We all know the Rodney King video, right? It should have been enough to explain that this is what happened. They beat him up. This was terrible. Look at the video. What the defense did was they slowed it down frame by frame. And they said, look what happened. Go to the next frame. You could see Rodney King moving up slightly. And then they would ask the officer, in that moment, what was your mental state? What were you thinking? And then the cop would say, well, I was in fear for my life. Never in that trial did the prosecution or the judge say, hey, you're slowing this down to frame by frame. That means this is 1/30th. If not 1/24th of a second. That's frame by frame. And having that knowledge would have, I think, changed the course of history. And I think that was a huge indicator No one stood up to that. And I think this case, we're all much more video savvy now. We all understand what different angles mean and what you're seeing and what you're not seeing as well, and how to put these things together. So I think we have a much better chance of getting a guilty verdict here too. And I just want to also point out the Minneapolis Penal Code. I was just kind of doing some due diligence here on that. I think it's interesting that none of them have a premeditation requirement, right? So second and third degree don't have premeditation. So he didn't plan to kill him. That's what they're going to try to prove. All they need to prove is that in the murder charges that he intended to kill. So what the prosecution needs to do beyond a reasonable doubt is say that once George Floyd went unconscious at 4 minutes, that Derek Chauvin intended to kill. He intended to kill or did something so wildly reckless, depraved, indifferent to human life that he caused the death of another person. I think it's very obvious.
Yeah.
I think it's painfully obvious.
And at the point that somebody's unconscious and you don't even attempt CPR, not even attempt, because police officers are trained to deliver and administer CPR. I know that for a fact. 866-801-8255. It was his duty to resuscitate.